not feeling the best. Feel a little bit like I'm dying and a little bit like I'm sick. And I do have a stab wound in my arm. But we're making a video anyways because I just watched Parasite and Knives Out today. Finally got to see it. And I have some thoughts about those two movies. Specifically about Knives Out, but we're going to talk about Parasite first because that's the one I watched first. By the way, I'm going to be talking about these movies in detail, so there's going to be a lot of spoilers, so if you don't want spoilers, then don't watch this. One of my coworkers, explained Parasite, and I, am finally starting to get it because they have this whole idea throughout the movie that, it's metaphorical. They really hammered that home at the beginning about, The Rock and it being metaphorical. So I guess, the whole movie thing is metaphorical, but the thing about movies with me is that I want to walk away from it, understanding what I needed to walk away from it with. And I didn't get that with Parasite. It was very entertaining, and it was very well made, but I still don't really get what I was supposed to get out of the movie. But I'm guessing I just need to think about it more, but I don't want to. That's the thing about movies. I want them to be easy. For me, it's a thing that I watch when I just want to not think. Strictly want to be entertained. And I don't want to do a lot of hard thinking. And I think I do with this movie, and I don't really want to. But, Parasite was a very good movie. I don't know how I feel about the themes in it. There's the obvious questions of, did they do the wrong thing? And, I think that they did, lying is bad, but also they were just stealing from the rich, and I think that's the thing we should all implement in our daily lives. And that bitch was crazy. The old housekeeper, I forgot all of their names. I just remember their American names, and that's very bad of me. Just remember Kevin and Jessica, and those were not their real names. But the old housekeeper who was just keeping her husband in the basement, and her husband was very much crazy. Instead of just being I'm gonna push this button like a normal person, he would, bang his head against it. I think that contributed to him being, really just not sane. He was wild. But that 30-minute scene with the whole Kim family staying at the house while the Park family went to go camping, and then the ringing, and then the old housekeeper shows up, and then has to go feed her husband, and then that whole moment with the rising tension and the family being we're coming home now. That shit was good. That shit was what you call tension. That was good. The music score underneath it, the writing, the cinematography, that was beautiful. And they held that tension for a while, and it did not break. It only rose, and it only maintained, and I appreciate that. That's good filmmaking. And then everything just sort of went to shit after that, because then their whole house was underwater, and then their daughter died. And then his dad is now on the run. Well, not on the run. He's in hiding. And they don't when you see the ending with the son being I'm gonna own this house, and then all you're gonna have to do is walk up the stairs, and then they show that whole what if, and you think it's oh, that is what happens, but then they cut back to him just sort of writing the letter, and I'm just oh. So there's the possibility that may never happen. Because wouldn't that also be just slightly suspicious that these two people who were involved in this whole crime at this house just later go and buy the house? I don't know. I also just think it's weird that there aren't plans or blueprints that go with the house to show that there's a bunker, and no one's ever found out that there's a bunker at that house. It's just a bit odd. But it's when my coworker was explaining it to me, it's sort of both of those families are parasites in the way that they're leeching off the family, and that I get and I understand. But I'm also just sort of is that a bad thing? I think that's the question you're supposed to take away from it, is that a bad thing? I don't feel like it is. I feel the first family of the old housekeeper and her husband, that was fine. If she's being honest with the whole, I'm gonna take my whole salary, I'm taking my salary to feed him, whatever, who cares? And they're in debt, I get that. And then the second family is just sort of were they doing anything wrong, really? They were lying about who they were, but they did their jobs, and I think that's fine. And that family was just sort of all over the place anyways. I did miss the first 10 minutes of the movie, so there might have been some big expose, what's the word, expedition? The explanation, it's the word where it's explaining what's happening, but it's at the beginning. They might have had a bunch of that might have contextualized the story for me, but didn't miss it, because I'm pretty on point with the fact that the beginning first 10 minutes where they're just explaining things, boring. It only really gets interesting in between like the second and third act. That's when movies get interesting. That's when I really start like enjoying what I'm watching. But the beginning 10 minutes, boring. Always boring. Because it's just explaining shit. And I'm just like, oh my god, okay, I get it, whatever. I just don't really get what I'm supposed to, like, am I supposed to walk away from that and be like, oh yeah, don't lie because you'll be, like, murdered. I also just think that that rich family, I don't have a lot of compassion for them. Just because they're just sort of rich and a bit self-centered and sort of like, oh, we're rich and we don't really care about other people. Because, like, when that guy came out with, like, a knife and stabbed Jessica, they were just like, oh no, my son, I have to get him to the hospital. Which, like, first of all, if you had a really traumatic experience with your son where he had a seizure and you're like, he has to get to the hospital super fast, and, like, that was such a big stressful moment for you, why wouldn't you be more prepared for, like, if this were to happen again? Why did they have to be like, oh my god, we have to go now, we can't get an ambulance because the ambulance is going to take too long? And, like, why don't you just give me the keys to the car? Why don't they, like, spare keys somewhere where they could just run and go get them? Why do they have to rely on Mr. Kim, the driver, to do that for them? Like, that was silly. And, like, why don't, like, I get that, like, ambulances take some time, but shouldn't there be, like, an ambulance system for, like, emergencies? Like, rapid emergencies? You know how, like, those old people, they have, like, the things that they can click if they've, like, fallen down and, like, that immediately calls an ambulance? Why don't they have one of those for their son? I just feel like it's a bit silly that they were not more prepared for this to happen again to their son. And they had to rely on him to, like, give them the keys. Or, like, first of all, to get up and drive them to the hospital. As if he doesn't have as if the murderer isn't right there. And I'm like, they didn't do shit. First, and second of all, why don't they have security? They're rich. Why don't they have, like, a security guard to be like, I'm gonna watch over the house, you have valuables, and this is a nice, rich house? Like, what kind of naivete? You just have a security system, but you don't have, like, a person to, like, watch things in case shit like this happens? Like, I get that if there's no prior incident, you don't have a reason to believe that this could happen again, but, like, or that this could happen at all. But, like, also, why? If you're rich and you can afford it, which you clearly can, why don't you just have a security guard? Would have made everything so much easier. But, like, we're talking about a fictional story, so, like, whatever. But that guy was literally wild, and he almost killed Kevin. Kevin was great. He had this weird thing with this girl, which I don't know how we're supposed to feel about that. I don't know the culture in Korea. I've never been there. I don't know anything about it. But he seemed to be in college, and she seemed to be a sophomore in high school, which means she was like 15. And he was drinking. That means he's probably at least like 18. It just seems like that age difference is a bit weird. And he was like, I'm gonna wait until she's in university to ask her out. But they were basically already together. And he also made a promise to his friend Min, who was like, I'm gonna trust you to tutor her because I know that you won't hit on her because I like her. And then he did it anyways. And I'm like, what? Why would you do that to your boy? I think the thing that you should take away from the story, if I were to be so bold as to conjecture, I don't think those words were used correctly at all, but we're gonna continue, is that you shouldn't overstep your bounds. It's like, it's like what that guy said. You need to find the line, but not cross it. When they all came over to the house, when the family was camping, that was crossing the line. And that is when everything went to shit. If they weren't there, everything would have been fine. Everything legitimately would have been fine. Because then the family wouldn't have been there for them to tumble down the stairs and get caught. And then the family wouldn't have been there. That means they would have been at home and able to, shut the window and protect and get all their stuff out when it was flooding. Like, literally, find the line, but don't cross it. There we go. I understand. But speaking of rich families, let's talk about Knives Out. Everyone's been seeing Knives Out. Everyone loves Knives Out. I love Knives Out. I don't think it's a great movie. Everyone's talking about how, like, wonderful it is and how it's, like, a really good murder mystery and blah, 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 whatever. Don't really care. I care about Chris Evans. And I care about Marta. Marta, the sweetest girl. Love her. So glad she got to keep all that money and all of the company and that house. And I still don't know his name, Mr. Thumbleberg, the guy who was murdered, the guy who was gapped. He was so nice. I'm so mad that he died when he did not need to die. I am mad. But Chris Evans cannot believe my boy Chris Evans would betray me like that. Like, I knew somewhere deep in the recesses of my mind that he was, like, suspicious. His whole ass name was legitimately Ransom? Who names their child Ransom? I know his name was actually Hugh, but he chose to go by Ransom? That's sketchy. But also, there was the whole thing that they talked about and, like, the whole story with, like, the dogs yap, 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 yap. And they made a whole point when the dogs came up to Marta to be like, oh, the dogs weren't barking because they like her. But when he walked up, the dogs did not like him. I was like, suspicious. But then he went to go talk to Marta at the whole diner thing, and he, like, cornered her. I was like, you're going to tell me the truth. And then he was like, you're going to keep the money, and we're going to do this together. And I was like, oh, what a guy. He's just doing this because he wants to screw over his family because he already got screwed over. But no, he's a liar. And he's been planning this whole thing. And he was a bad guy. He was the murderer. And I trusted him. And I was like, oh, sure, he's fine. Because those like 10 minutes when they were like hanging out and talking and in the car and trying to like solve this whole ransom thing together. Blackmail, ransom. I was like, this is a wonderful Wattpad fanfic. It's just like, oh, you're a nice, poor, innocent girl who's just like helping this nice, wonderful, rich family, and one of them happens to be Chris Evans. And you guys like get mixed up in a bunch of trouble, but you get to run away together. That's what I thought was gonna happen. That's what I hoped was gonna happen, but it didn't. It didn't because Chris Evans wanted to betray us. He wanted to be like, hi, I'm the murderer. And I was like, why? It was unnecessary. All those rich people think that they were entitled to his money, and they were not. And that's why I'm so glad that Marta got it. I'm just mad in general that guy had to die, though, because he was so kind. When Marta thought that she killed him, which she actually didn't because she's one great nurse, a wonderful nurse, a wonderful person. He was like, we can't do this. You cannot go to jail for my murder because your mom is undocumented and I want to take care of you. This movie is also weirdly political and I don't know why, and I'll like maybe get into it later, but anyways, he was so kind and he left everything in his will to her. And this movie, I understood the message was be kind to people. It was so clear, just like if you're kind, you'll get good things. It's karma. It was so clear. All the assholes in the family got nothing. But the one good person who actually spent time with him and cared about him and talked to him, she got everything. And I love her. I'm so glad that she got to keep everything. Because that's what she deserved. Because every single member of that family was nasty and evil and mean to her. Even Meg. Especially Meg. Because Meg wanted to be like, hi, I'm your friend, and because we're like the same age, we're gonna be on the same level. But then like as soon as her mom was like, we need this money because we can't pay for your college, she was like, ring ring, Marta, hey, I'm gonna frame you for a little bit and like lie to you and say that I'm not on the phone because of my family, but I definitely am on the phone because of my family, and I'm gonna tell my whole family about your mom so that they have more reason to come after you. Okay, bye. And then Marta forgave her after that. The audacity! Because Marta's a sweet girl, but Meg did not deserve to be forgiven. Meg can go choke. Meg can go die in a hole with the rest of her family because all of them are what? Disgusting. None of them deserved a single penny, a single red dime of his money. No. I like the way that the mystery was laid out, though. It was really well written, and it was not one of those mysteries where when it just sort of comes out of nowhere. You're able, like, if you watch it, you're able to actually pick up on the clues and be like, hey, I can figure it out. And I'm glad that I did. It was nice and it was fun. But, question, I'm not a lawyer, but I know a bit about lawyery things. I was in mock trial for 2 days, so I know a bit about lawyery things. But hopefully an actual lawyer, like, analyzes this. I know there's like a YouTuber lawyer guy who like does a bunch of movie things, and I hope he does this because it's an actual question that I have. They say that she would have gone to prison for his murder, but he did in fact murder himself. Even if like the tox screen showed that he had like 100 milligrams of morphine in him and that would have killed him, if his actual cause of death was blood loss from like a corroded artery or whatever because he slit his throat, then like was that murder? Because his cause of death was not an overdose of morphine because he was able to murder himself before the morphine killed him. So like, Could she even be taken to court for murder if the thing that she almost killed him with didn't actually kill him? Like, if his cause of death was not the thing that she did, could she actually have gone to jail for that because he didn't die by whatever she did? Like, it doesn't make any sense. If he died by actual suicide, even if the whole thing with the morphine actually happened, could she have gone to jail for that because that didn't kill him? Like, it doesn't make any sense. I'm not a lawyer, though. I would argue it doesn't. She should have been fine either way, and the Slayer rule should not have come into contact, and she should have kept that, all of the money. All of it. Because that's what she deserves. But I'm not a lawyer. Can an actual lawyer tell me if this is true? But, like, what a noble man. He was like, oh, I'm gonna die. Even though she said in, like, 5 minutes you would feel blah, 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 blah. And if he felt none of it, he should have been like, maybe, because it should have been more obvious to be like, oh, I feel like 100 milligrams of morphine would make you feel a bit different. And you'd be like, this is a bit suspicious. But if you don't feel shit, you should have been like, because he didn't. He was not 100 milligram morphine. He was fine. But he took himself out anyways, like a true homie, did that for Marta so that she could keep all the money and so her and her family could be safe. And that was what a good guy. That's a real, what a good dude. The rest of the family, though, they can choke. Every single one of them sucks. I really love, though, how the dad wrote a letter for Jamie Lee Curtis. I forget her name. It starts with an L. But Jamie Lee Curtis. But it, like, looked blank so that when Richard looked at it, he wouldn't be able to tell. He'd be like, oh, it's just blank. But then she was like, oh, I know Dad writes letters to me like this. And then it says, your husband is a scumbag and is cheating on you. And she's like, that was clever. That was cute. I feel like there are too many characters, though. I feel like in a movie like this where you're not going to point the blame at every single one of them, too many characters. Because if all of them aren't suspects, there's just too much filler. Like that little kid, Jordan, whatever, the kid who was like an alt-right internet troll, we didn't need him. He had like 2 lines. Walt, I was gonna say Walt's wife, because she was never in the movie. Don't know why she was mentioned at all. She was not important. But Walt in general, I feel like he was sort of like a mini suspect to be like, oh, he wanted the company. But like all of his thing and Jamie Lee Curtis's thing and Richard's thing was all thrown away in the first 20 minutes and then we like never saw them again. And I was like, I just feel like there was a lot of characters and we didn't need all those characters. And I also didn't like how Daniel Craig was Southern. It really threw me off. I really was expecting him to come through with his strong British accent, but then he didn't, and I was like, okay. I really did like how all the pieces came together, though. When Francine was like, you did this, but it was Hugh who did this, because when he had the whole throwaway line, was like, call me Ransom, only the help calls me Hugh. It's like character building and also a clue. That's good writing. This movie had great writing. Great writing, great colors. All the colors were really well, and like they were bright, but not like obnoxious, and they all worked really well in like the landscape of everything. Beautiful color schemes. Beautiful color grading is what I should say. The person who did the color grading, beautiful. There were wonderful actors in it. Love Jamie Lee Curtis. Love Chris Evans. Love that Chris Evans was Jamie Lee Curtis' son. That, iconic. Also, another thing. Again, not a doctor. Don't know how vile things work. But if it's been punctured already, couldn't you tell? Like, isn't it sort of like a seal on anything where when it's broken, you're like, oh, this has been tampered with, so that you don't use it on like a patient. I feel like at the beginning of the scene, there was a thing where she said that she drank some champagne so that's why she didn't want to, I don't remember. She said something about champagne, but also later in the flashback, she said that she didn't drink any champagne because she was on duty. So like, maybe at some point she drank champagne and that's why she got everything mixed up and was a bit careless and that's why she was freaking out about everything, but I don't really remember. Anyways, wouldn't you tell? Isn't there some sort of safeguard on medical equipment to be like, oh, this has a hole in it, I shouldn't use it because it's been tampered with. If there's not, there really should be. The only character besides Marta and Ransom that I really liked was Meg's mom. I think her name was Jodie. She was kind of an awful person, but I feel like out of all the family members, she was the most bearable because in that one moment when everyone was being really racist and being like, immigration, 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 and then Richard was like, come over here, Marta. She was like, Jodie was like, you really don't have to be a part of this conversation. And that I respect her for. I don't like how all the family was like, this isn't fair. We're the family. And we should get all this money. I was like, no, you all suck. And you all deserve nothing. I'm glad that they got nothing in the end. I'm sure, because it wasn't 100% clear what her choice was. I think it was supposed to be like a subtle thing that she did choose to keep all the money and like fuck the rest of them, because she was like, what should I do with the money? And then Daniel Craig was like, I know what I think, but you're gonna do what you feel is right. And then she was standing on the balcony above all of them with the cup that said, you know, my house, my rules, my coffee. So I think that was just sort of the thing to show that she was like, oh, this is mine now, and you're all down there because you're all kicked out. I hope that's what happened. I'm still mad that Chris Evans betrayed us like that, because he wasn't in the first half of the movie. And when he finally showed up, I was like, thank God. This movie does not have enough Chris Evans. Because they market it a lot. They market this movie really heavily with Chris Evans and Jamie Lee Curtis. And Jamie Lee Curtis was literally like not in the movie at all. She deserved to be in the movie more as well. But Chris Evans was like not in the movie. And like the first act, he was not in the movie. And then he shows up and he's like so cocky and like an asshole, and I'm like, ooh, ooh, ooh. And then he like does some shady shit and like is still a bad guy, but I'm like, but it's still Chris Evans and that white sweater though, mwah. But then he betrays us and ends up being the big murderer loser who's like, I'm gonna kill my grandfather because I want money. I'm a trust fund kid who can't do shit for himself. And then when he got caught, he was like, I'm gonna kill murder, I'm gonna take a sword off the thing. Which, first of all, I was like, why are none of them secured? That's stupid. Second of all, when he was like, I was like, I know for a fact that ain't no real knife, and I was not gonna go through her. Because one, that's stupid. Two, you would not have just like knives in like a Game of Thrones chair. Just like sitting, that's so dumb. That's so dumb on so many levels. Like if there was like a break-in, bunch of murder weapons. If there was like an earthquake, just knives on the floor. Like that's so dumb on so many levels. I don't care how rich and eccentric you are, you're not gonna do that. You're gonna secure your knives if they're real, and if they're not, like that knife wasn't, then you wouldn't. That's the only thing that made sense. So when she actually was like, and it was like one of those knives, beautiful moment. But also there were like 3 cops in that room, and he laid on top of her for like a good 3 seconds, and I'm just like, is no one gonna do anything? The thing with stab wounds is, if you leave the knife in, you're gonna be fine. As long as the blood isn't coming out. If you remove the knife, then the blood is able to come out. But if you leave the knife in, it just like sort of keeps the hole closed, and then you're fine. You go to the hospital, they take it out, they stitch you up, you're fine. I say that so flippantly. You might not be fine, you could die. Stab wounds are serious, but like, for the most part, you'll be fine. I'm not a doctor though. Once again, don't get stabbed and then die and then say, I told you it was gonna be fine. I'm not a doctor. I think the thing with murder mysteries though is that so many of the new ones have gotten so much like double, triple, quadruple think that when it's so obvious and right in front of you that's like, oh yeah, Ransom did it, is that you can't believe it, because then you're like, but what if that's what they want you to think? And you just like double guess yourself, and that's what fucks you up. Because like, I'm pretty sure that in the beginning of the movie, when the dogs were like bark, bark, bark at Ransom, I was like, oh, that's a bit suspicious. Maybe we should think about him. But I was like, nah, that's nothing. That's just a red herring. But then it wasn't. You never know what a red herring is, because so many things want to be clever and make a bunch of twists and be like, haha, you can't guess it. Those are bad. Cough, cough, Pretty Little Liars. Those are bad. But that movie was good. I like murder mysteries. That was a fun thing to watch. I'd like to go back and just watch those 20 minutes where we thought Chris Evans was a good person. Not a good person. Where we thought Ransom was like not a murderer. Those 20 seconds, beautiful. From like the time where he like saunters into the house to like the point where he gets arrested. Beautiful. Beautiful. Where you trust his character and he's just like a bad boy, but he's hot because he's Chris Evans. And you're like, wonderful. That should be a separate movie. Do that. Do that. Because apparently Chris Evans really liked this role because he's able to play like a bad guy, which is the complete opposite of Captain America, which like, good for him. Good for him. Expand your horizons. Don't get pigeonholed by Disney. Even though this is, I think, also a Disney film because it said something about Lucasfilms in the credits, and Lucasfilms is owned by Disney, so I think this is also kind of a Disney movie, but whatever. I want a good, like, one of those bad boys with heart of gold where he's like, I'm bad, but I also care about people, and I care about my family, and I'm just this way because of past trauma. That's what I wanted Chris Evans to play. That's what I want for him. That's what I want to see. Like a ransom that's not, like, actually a murderer. Just, like, sort of a shitty person. Both of those movies were over 2 hours, and I think any movie over 2 hours is too long. Like, I feel like this movie was unnecessarily political. Had nothing really to do with the story whatsoever. Other than, I think, to paint the family as bad people, regardless of which side of the aisle you stand on. Like, there were some of them that were, like, some sort of nasty Republicans. And, like, you could be like, Republicans, I don't like them. Or there were some, like, liberal snowflakes, and you could be like, liberal snowflakes, I don't like them. Like, it was really, they really had some really strong players on either side to be like, no matter where you stand, you can hate this family together. And I think that was nice. I think that's the only purpose. And if that wasn't the purpose, cut it out. Cut it out. Chop it right out. Because it didn't make any sense or have any connection to the plot. Like, it didn't even really connect to Marta's storyline with her mom. Because once they find out that her mom is undocumented, it's not brought up again, like, their whole political alignments and their opinions. It doesn't, they don't connect. So I feel like that was just some weird fluff filler that we could have chopped right out of the movie. Along with the whole son. He could have been chopped right out of the movie. We could have had literally any other character be in the bathroom at that time. It could have been Walt's wife. Maybe she would have had a purpose in the story. Chop that whole kid out. That kid could have been gone. And then you don't have to worry about child labor laws. Cut that kid right out of the story. Cut him out. Maybe there's like a director's cut. That's something I would love to see. Because this movie was like pretty good. But I feel like there are parts where I'm just like, there's just not enough. I say while also being like, there's too much. There's too much of some things and not enough of the rest. I feel like there needed to be more family dynamics. Specifically, I want a scene between Jamie Lee Curtis and Chris Evans. That's what I want. They were mother and son. And then they, like, never interacted. That made me mad. Except for the one part where he gets cut off, and then she's like, I'm sure that this will be good for you. And he's like, my mother, everybody. And that's, like, that's all they had. That's what I wanted in the director's cut. I want a scene between Chris Evans and Jamie Lee Curtis. Beautiful. And cut out that kid. That kid did not need to be in the movie. He was a great actor, played the part really well. But he was very unnecessary to the plot. Like, literally any other character could have been there. It could have been Meg. She could have been smoking weed in the bathroom. Like, literally anything else. Like, just, he didn't need to be there. Too many characters. That's the thing that I find with these ensemble-based stories. There's just sometimes too many characters. Sometimes we just gotta cut some of them out. Sometimes we just don't need to pay all those actors to, like, be on location in Toronto for 3 weeks. We just don't need that in the budget. Like, I'm sure the budget for this was huge. They got Chris Evans and Jamie Lee Curtis. Like, we could have spent that money for all those other actors somewhere else. Anyways, I'm gonna go see more shows tomorrow. I'm so excited for Cats to come out. Not because I like Cats or because I think it'll be good, but because Star Wars is also coming out on that day, and I want to say, fuck Star Wars, I want to go watch Cats. I'm also going to see Queen and Slim tomorrow, and there's probably a bunch of other movies coming out that I'm excited for. Bombshell's coming out. In the Heights is coming out. Have y'all seen the trailer for In the Heights? In the Heights is going to slap. I saw the musical version of it on stage 23 times. The musical, literally perfect, literally beautiful, and this movie is going to be amazing. I know it's gonna slap so hard. It's gonna be so good. It's gonna be such a good movie. I really hope it doesn't let us down because so many people have such high hopes for this movie. I think it's gonna be really good. At the very least, they have, like, Latin actors, and that's all that I really care about. It's just they didn't whitewash anything, and that's beautiful. I just really love the costuming in Knives Out. Like, Jamie Lee Curtis's pink suit was beautiful. The colors, the fit, it was gorgeous. Everyone just had such nice clothes. And I like how Marta's was, like, toned down to show how she was just, you know, a nice simple girl. She wore, like, a button up underneath a sweater, and that's nice and simple. Everyone else had, like, scarves and dresses and sweaters and just, they were rich. They looked rich. The one thing I didn't like is how this movie sort of dipped in and out of being a murder mystery, because it started where you're like, oh, who killed this guy? And then it goes to, like, oh, Marta killed him, but she didn't mean to, so we just need to make sure that she gets away with it. But then it goes back to being like, oh, so it was a murder mystery. Something had happened But you don't really realize that until the very end, where you're like, oh, this was a murder mystery all along. Maybe that was the point, was that while they were giving you all these like clues in the middle to like misdirect you, because you're in the middle just thinking, oh, Marta did it, so we don't have to worry about trying to figure out who else did it because it's already figured out, until you get to the end and they're like, no, there's more layers to the story, and it actually was Ransom all along. I wish I would have known to watch throughout the movie, to be like, it's not as simple as it seems. I thought that it was like, oh, murder mystery, oh, mystery solved. But then it wasn't, because there was actually more to the story. That was a bit not fun. Because it wasn't like Clue. The movie Clue. Have you seen the movie Clue? Not that good of a movie, but I do love it. Where you're just like, oh, throughout the thing, you're trying to figure out who done it. But like 20 minutes into the movie, you're like, oh, I know who done it, and we just need to hope that she gets away with it. Until at the end where you're like, oh, someone else done it. Regardless. Wonderful movie. I enjoyed watching it. I had an enjoyable time watching that movie. Wish some things went differently, but then it would have been a different movie. Also really like Parasite. That movie, kind of spooky. Just a little bit spooky. Didn't realize it was rated R till about Act 3. You know what part I'm talking about if you've seen the movie. That threw me off guard. Regardless, both great movies. Very glad I watched them. I've been waiting to watch them for a long time. Knives Out got a lot of hype, and I don't necessarily believe it deserved all of the hype. I feel like people are overhyping it. Like, it's a good movie, but it's not like, wow. Like, I don't think that movie deserved, like, an Oscar. But it was a good movie. I feel like it deserves to make more than the budget it had. You know? Like, I feel like the movie deserves to make money. It's, like, good. Like, it's a good movie to go watch, and it is entertaining. But is it, like, does it deserve to be critically acclaimed? I do not believe so. Parasite, on the other hand, very, very good. Does deserve it. Wonderful story. Beautiful cinematography. There's also really good cinematography in Knives Out. In that moment when Marta's leaving the house after she finds out that she gets all the inheritance in the will, and it goes from, like, a steady cam to, like, someone actually moving, so it's, like, shaky as it's following her. Beautiful. And like the whole part where she's trying to start her car and then like Chris Evans pulls up and is like, get in my car, and she gets in the car. That was a Wattpad moment right there. That's why I'm still sort of salty that it didn't end up that way. That was like a come with me, I will come save you, I am hot and I am Chris Evans and we will go to a diner and I will help. When you thought everything was fine and you were able to trust him, but you couldn't because he's a liar. Like, yes, he does want money, but also he had nothing to do with it, so it's fine. But then he did have something to do with it. He had everything to do with it. Also, why didn't he just go to the hospital? Because in the weirdest of circumstances, we could have lied and not have to put Marta through all that. We could have said, oh, she put in the needle and was gonna go do something else, but he was like, oh, I'm just gonna take 100 milligrams of morphine on my own, and be like, whoopsie daisy. And then they could have gone to the hospital, and then if he died, she could have said it was all on him. Then that would have made her lie, and then she would have thrown up, and that would have been good. But I think that would have been so much easier, because then maybe he wouldn't be dead. I just wish he wasn't dead. I wish Chris Evans didn't lie to us, and that guy wasn't dead. And that Marta got to also keep all the money. That's all I wish. I had 3 wishes for this movie. And none of them came true! But I think those are all my thoughts on Parasite and Knives Out. If you saw the movie, tell me your thoughts. If you understand what I was supposed to take away from Parasite, then you tell me that. And if you have any explanation for the actual, like, science parts or the lawyery parts of Knives Out, let me know. She got everything. And that's what she deserved. Because she was so kind. She was so kind. She was so sweet and so kind.